Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So for today I'm using Creepy Cameos for the sentiment, Simon Says Stamp Kaleidoscope for the embossing, which I've already done and I will explain that later. And then the main star of the show is going to be the Honeybee Stamps Frightful Night Circlescape. So I love this Circlescape thing, and I also found that Spellbinder's large circles, the smooth ones, the largest of the large set, actually fits perfectly for the Circlescape. It fits perfectly on there. I can't talk today. So I also decided that I wanted to do some distress inking around the edges. You'll see later on my green for my grass is very bright, and that's not very spooky. So with the embossing folder, like I say, I've already embossed it, and it's this kaleidoscope style, and it's so pretty. And I'm also loving this sort of using darker cardstock in the background, embossing that, and then inking around the edge with a dark ink. It somehow highlights that centre bit, and I just love it. So I'm a little obsessed with that at the moment. So hence what I did there. And then I'm going to use black soot on all of the pieces. I just decided in the end that I was just going to go with that. I was thinking I would use a different colour for each thing, like a different sort of, like a darker yellow for the moon, you know, a sort of dark blue for the navy bit. But I just decided black soot works beautifully. So for the little pieces, and there are some tiny pieces here, I'm using just a finger dauber. I think these things are really handy. I'm actually going to purchase at some point another sort of box. I have mine came in like a little acrylic box with about 40 of them in there. They're not expensive at all. You can get them off Amazon, super inexpensive, like I say, but they're really handy. And I think if you had one set for 40 of your most used distress inks and 40 of your most used oxide inks, if that's the ink you like, or any other dye inks, and just have them separated that way, then at least you won't mix and match, because obviously the inks are different. So you need to sort of be aware that oxides are very different compared to distress inks. So keeping separate blenders for those is a good idea. But I just think for the tiny areas, it's so handy. It's just a handy size. And they're just little sponges, basically. So now that I've inked the edge of my moon and the sort of what will be the sky, I'm going to start to assemble it onto the circle that I used from the Spellbinder's dies. I just thought this made the most sense to kind of go along, ink and go as I go, if that made any sense. And so I've stuck down this sky area, and I've also not completely squashed it on there. That's a technical term, of course, but I'm sort of getting them in place, because with wet adhesive especially, you will have some time to, not a ton of time, but you'll have some time just to maneuver it in place. And you'll notice when you start to put this together, there is a right way to get it in the right spot, if that makes sense. So that all these pieces kind of fit together like a puzzle, and it's just so clever. I just love it. So of course the first one I ever bought of this, I had to have the Halloween one. It's shocking, I know. So at this point I didn't know where I was going to put my my fence. I actually there's a fence die in this set, and so I wasn't sure where I was going to put the fence, and you'll see why in a bit. So I haven't put my tree in. But the next thing I needed to work out, because you can see these green pieces for the like landscape, they're quite a bright green, and obviously that's not very Halloweeny for a nighttime scene anyway. So I needed to work out which piece went where, and then so that I knew which was the top and which was the bottom of that piece. And all I'm doing is adding the ink to the bottom of the pieces so that it darkens and deepens that bottom edge, but the top is still light. So it's kind of like the moon is shining down over the top edges of the ground. That made any sense as well. So it helped to sort of highlight it and distress it, but not take away from the fact that there is supposed to be like a big moon in the background. So at this point I decided, looking at my fence, that I would get the tree stuck in. Now I've got to say, I have a fine applicator on my little glue bottle thing. Again, I think I just got this off Amazon. This one I think is actually a Crafter's Companion. You get a set of 2 of these little bottles, and they just have like a stainless steel pin in them to keep it from blocking, although I've had my fair share of blockages, so you guys have witnessed that. So I was able to, with the nozzle, because it's so fine, able to get in the little nooks and crannies where all the branches would go, and just because it, like I say, it's so easy and it's like a little puzzle, it just literally slotted in there, and it just looks so cool. And I know, sort of looking at it now, it looks like, you know, you wouldn't necessarily need to put the tree in because the backdrop, or that circle at the background, is actually black, but it does add something to it by adding that piece in there. So this is where I was fiddling with my fence to see whether I wanted it behind the tree, or to look like it was behind the tree or not. In the end, I do not do that. So I just stuck the first bit of landscape down and the base of the tree down, and I will start to assemble all the different layers of the landscape. And again, it's really easy. I'm kind of popping it in place and then pushing it up against the layer above. So working out which one's my next one, and then again inking as I went. It's just how it worked out, but you could ink up all these pieces if you wanted to. This was just the easiest way for me. I'm sort of doing it as I'm going along because I wanted to know which edge I needed to actually ink against, to make sure that I got it the right way up, at least in my mind. And actually it turned out really, really cool. I think it looks really nice. It's got this sort of like highlighted area at the top of the grass where it does look like there could be some light from the moon coming down, which I know that's what I said earlier. But if I just left it plain, like the green that is, or you know, that the cardstock is, it just wouldn't have been the same, I don't think. So I think if you're going for a bright, fun, you know, whimsical kind of Halloween scene, you could make a pink tree, you know, or a purple tree, and, you know, use just bright colors and make it a really bright, fun scene. But because I was going specifically for a very dark, my Halloween stuff tends to be darker because I quite like that. I know it kind of freaks people out, but I do like the darker, more the darker side of Halloween. So for me, this made sense. But like I say, you can make this into a really bright, fun kind of, you know, using all the bright kind of Halloween colors. But doesn't it look so cool? And it's all flat. Like there's no dimension or anything. It's just, but it looks dimensional. It's just the coolest thing. I just love these things. They've got a few different types as well of the scapes, I guess. I think are they all Circlescape? I think they are all Circlescapes. Anyway. So with the fence, because the fence is just, again, created so well, there's only a piece at the top that sort of joins all the posts of the fence. So I just added some glue to the base or the bottom of each of those little post things. And you'll see why in a second. It just makes it easy because there's only that one link for all those fence posts. I can now manipulate that fence and bend it so that it goes along the curve of the landscape line. So I just think, I don't know if this was planned by Honeybee. It probably was. They're very clever and I love their stuff. But I just thought this made sense, and then I've kind of manipulated it along the edge of the landscape, and it just makes it look like it was this rickety old fence, you know, along this wonky landscape. So it is a bit messy because obviously the glue kept oozing out and stuff like that, but honestly it's worth doing. This one on the left hand side, I just kind of tucked him underneath the last one. I didn't really want to cut any of it off, but it works out just fine, and it just looks like it's all where it's supposed to be. It worked out really, really well. So I also left the top part not glued because I didn't know at this point whether I was going to add anything behind the fence. So there's a lot of little pieces, as you can see here, that create other like components or bits that you can add to it. So there's a cross, there's a couple of tombstones, which I'm going to ink just in the black and make them look kind of greyish. There's a couple of pumpkins as well, like 2 different sizes, and bats. So I've cut all of those pieces out. For the pumpkins, I will also add in, I cut them out twice. I cut them in orange and in black so that I can add their faces, which, by the way, are teeny tiny. So it was a bit of a mission, but you'll see that in a second. But what I decided to do, instead of inlaying the faces back into the orange pumpkins, I decided to leave the faces from when I die cut them out in orange cardstock. I decided to leave them in place and just add the faces on top of that, just for something different, and it gives it a tiny bit of dimension, but it's not overly obvious that there's lots of dimension there because of the face. If it was a much bigger die cut, you would see that more, and it could look pretty cool. But this, I don't know why, this just made sense at the time. But I could have inlaid them, especially the way that I landed up adding these pieces to this set. So when it came to putting the tombstones on, of course the tombstones have a flat bottom. And so for this bigger one, it doesn't look quite right because it's on the curve of the bank or the hill. But because I used a cross, and I did turn it upside down, because I used a cross and I turned it upside down, it actually worked, because I can make it look like it had fallen against the tombstone, and the tombstone looks like it's falling over, and then it hides that sort of landscape line, if you like, or horizon, whatever you want to call it, so that it looks like it's supposed to be where it is, and it doesn't look like it's sitting like balancing on top of the curve of the hill. And then for the next one, I went along the same sort of line. I was trying to see if I could go along one of the other little landscape lines, if that makes sense, with the little one, but I just stuck him there. He actually made sense there. He fitted nicely. And then I just added the pumpkins in, and we'll fiddle and faff with the eyes and the mouth in a minute. So the little one, which also made sense because he was further away, I then put in the at the base of the tree and fence, and I thought he looked really cool there. And then the other little pumpkin I put with the smaller tombstone, and I just think it worked out really nice. You could cut a billion of these and just you could actually slot them just behind the hillsides. You could do all sorts of things. So then for the bats, I just decided that I would pop them on, overlapping a little of that moon and the sky, because don't forget the moon and the sky are like they're both part of the scene. So if you just had them in front of the moon, it might look a little odd, whereas if they're flying across them, as so to speak, then it makes it look more realistic, like they're just in the air and the moon's in the distance kind of thing. That makes some sense anyway. So then this is where I'm going to add the mouths and the little eyes. They're very, very teeny tiny, and I learned from the first one that I do not need as much glue as I put on these. They really are tiny, but I got it done, so that's the main thing, right? And the little black pumpkins, you can either keep those and use them for something else, or I could have actually stuck them to the inside of the card. That would have made sense, because I just have like white, because my card base is white, just white sort of eyes and mouth, just for a little like silhouette type look. So I could have actually done that. I didn't for this one. And then again, just adding in the eyes and the mouth with much less glue for the littler pumpkin. And I actually for this one overlaid it over the top of the pumpkin and sort of pushed those pieces through, and that sort of worked. The mouth didn't want to come out, so I had to do that separately, but the eyes, it worked really well. It just popped them in there for me. And then it's just a little less fiddly. So you could also use a pair of like reverse tweezers to help pop those things in place. I'm using it's actually like a used for nail artists, to pick up the tiny little I suppose like little diamantes to put onto fancy nails, but I just use it for this, and it's similar to one that was in the market. I don't know if you can still get it. I think it was called a crystal katana. I don't know if you can still get that, but there's a lot of tools out there that will help you pick up little tiny pieces that are, just too fiddly for your fingers, because if you're anything like me, I have sausage fingers, and picking up teeny tiny little things is just a bit of a nightmare. Anyway, so I've now stuck the base, the embossed piece to the card front, and this is just a 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 square card. So the front panel is 4 1/4 square, as well as the card base being 8.5 by 4 1/4 and scored at 4 1/4. A lot of 4 1/4s, and then I decided to just stick that completely flat in the middle to the card base. And because I had embossed the background piece, I made sure I used some wet adhesive, because it will just bond to that piece a lot better, and it will hold it in place. You could use foam, but I would still suggest adding some wet adhesive to the back of the foam as you stick it down, and that would look really cool too, and also help to keep that stuck to the front of the card. Sometimes with some foam and some dry adhesive, they tend to pop off after a little while. We're talking maybe like, I don't know, a few months or whatever, but I never want my cards and projects to fall apart. So if I'm going to glue that thing, it's going to be glued within an inch of its life. So the sentiment, which came from Newton's Nook, it was the Cameo. I showed it at the beginning. I'm sorry, I've forgotten what it's called. I used some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. It's one of my favorite inks, but because it is a pigment ink, I popped a piece of copy paper just in between that, so that in case while I was doing this next bit, I pressed a bit on the card front, it wouldn't then transfer that ink to the inside, the left-hand side of the inside of the card. So it's just a handy hint. And then I also tried not to move the card while I was doing this, just so again it didn't smudge what was in there. And all I've done is taken some little Lucy's iridescent itty bitty stars. These are just the best thing ever. I think she might do, I haven't looked on her website for a little while, but I really need to stock up on the itty bitty stars and try and get some silver and gold ones, because those would be fantastic for Christmas. But for Halloween, I think little iridescent ones, or even Christmas, the iridescent ones take on the colour of what's behind them. So they've got that slight mother of pearl look, but they're so pretty. And on the die cut, on the sky part of the die, so where I've put the little stars, it actually like debosses in that area. So there is some, like you can see some effect in the background for like stars, but I just added those in. I thought it made just a nice extra touch to it. And obviously you can bling up the rest of it if you wanted to, but I thought that was enough. So there's the card, guys, and wishing you a spooky Halloween on the inside. I don't often do that, but I suddenly realized I didn't have a sentiment. So until next time, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. Bye for now.